Testing. Okay. Okay, so basically, what I was gonna talk about, is how, I guess you could call me crazy if you want, but I mean, I would have to admit that there's probably really not a waking moment where I don't, how am I trying to say this? There's probably not a waking moment that I don't envision or think about these beings, you know? Like, I mean, I guess, I guess I could say I probably spend 98% of my time trying not to think about what's around me or trying to not think about people, whether that would be people that I know or the idea and concepts of people that I may meet in the future. I feel as though my mind is invaded by thoughts of people. You know, I don't really know how to describe it. I feel almost like, I'm not saying that it's people's thoughts that are invading my mind, even though at times it does seem like that, because it seems like, I don't know, I feel like, like when you step into a room of people, or you're in the presence of a person, you may or may not be vibing on the same frequency as that person. You may have very diametrically opposing views. You really don't know. But the thing is, for some reason I can't help but not to think or take in a degree of things that people say. And one thing that I'll admit kind of annoys me about people is people are always talking. Like when you deal with, like, I'm ranting right now for the sake of ranting, but I usually don't talk a lot. Like when you deal with animals, animals can be vocal, but a lot of times they don't make any noise at all. You know, they might be breathing heavy, they might be moving around, but they may be, a lot of times they're not making any sound at all, really. Or they're not talking. But thing about people is you can understand when a person talks. So depending on what a person says, whether there's any validity to what they say or not, to some degree you may think on the words they say. And oftentimes people tend to talk out of their ass. 98% of the time they seem to be talking out of their ass most of the time. But I say all of that to really get to the point of that, like I said, people's actions and words to me a lot of times feel very invasive. Like I seem to, I would literally say since I was born, probably since I was a child, um even since I was ever able to really understand what people were saying and what was going on around me, people's words that they would say always just seemed very invasive, and I always had somewhat of a disdain for people in general, and oftentimes really didn't give two shits, honestly, about what people would say or do, or even what they would claim is imperative and important. I'd be more analytical. Like I'd more or less critique it, and if it didn't seem that important to me, I would usually just abandon it. And if you push the issue, I would get very easily annoyed, and my mind would almost want to like fall asleep, literally. I guess as a way of defense mechanism, because for whatever reason I felt like what someone was saying had no, not that it had no value, but that it was more or less an annoyance for them to even be sitting there talking about something, and even more annoying that they have such an emphasis on it or that they feel so strongly about it. But after years, I guess like any adult, over years I was able to be more empathetic and understand that, like, just because something is not so important to me, or there's not a sense of urgency with me, that maybe to that person, for whatever reason, there really is, or maybe they think there is. Because, sometimes when you think on something, it seems really important, but it's actually not. And a lot of times people do find that out. Like, they sweat things, then they realize that it's not really that important, but they're focusing on it so strongly, because we all do that. But what, again, to go to say is that ever since I was a child, my mind would be way more, and I guess you could say it's just part of having an imagination, but my mind was always focused on the other side of reality, like the beings that people may not may or may not believe in, you know the because whether someone's going to believe it or not, or most people by any chance would never believe it, but there is a, how do I say this, there is a crossover between what you would call civilization and then the wild. Okay, so there's beings that are basically, they're intelligent like people, but they are so animal that you would, it's like something you would say was out of a sci-fi. Like, you would say it was out of Hollywood. You would say it was like something you've seen in a werewolf movie. You know what I mean? Or oftentimes like a lion like, cat like, almost sort of being or creature. So it sounds crazy, and there's way more to it. It's not just lions and or cats and dogs. It's like a lot of things, man. Like reptilian, lizard like things, dinosaur like freaking things. Ape and monkey like things, in just a whole gamut of these beings that are not, they're not, how do I say it? They're like humanoid, but they're animal. There's like goat type and ram type. There's all types, man. Okay. But to most people, if you would dare even speak about it, they would call you completely crazy. The only people that would not call you crazy are the people that have encountered some of these things. Those are the only people that really would know. Okay, I mean, and even more. There's bird-like people. Oh man, there's like humanoids that are different colors of blue, green, whatever, gray, white, you name it. It's. I'm telling you. So basically, as crazy as this fucking sounds, usually there is not a waking moment that my mind does not drift off into, because there's levels of how connected you could be to the thing, or how you daydream or think on a thing or whatever. There's levels. Okay. Even if you're just thinking on something, or I guess you could say, like, I'll give you an example. Like, if you're sitting alone, right? If you're sitting alone and you're outdoors, and you you have this weird feeling that you just know that, even if, I guess how I'm trying to say this is, if you know that the ground that you're on, you know that there were things there years ago, it could even be thousands of years ago, that you know that things walked there that were, let's just say, very strange and unknown to to what people even believe can exist. And It's almost like there's no escaping your connection to that. You know what I mean? There's just no escaping your connection to that at all. I'm not saying everyone is connected to that, but I'm saying I know I am. So there's no, and for me, there's no escaping it. It's like if you go to sleep, especially if you go to sleep, you're gonna find yourself always drifting off to that, and you're gonna revert to that every single time. And I would say, you know, this is probably not making any sense to somebody. Somebody's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But whatever. I'm just ranting because I'm not sleeping right now, and this is what this rant is about. This is a rant, in case you didn't know. But what I was gonna say is that a lot of this has to do with what you would call impulse. Impulse, and I mean the type of impulse that's almost like primal fear, where it's like if you're not concentrating on what you're thinking or doing, this will always take over. You will always revert to that, and it is almost like a default because it just is. There's no not saying there's no getting around it, because if you really want to push against something enough, you can, and you could suppress something. But what I'm saying is, without any type of push, you will always revert to that, and you will always be connected to that, and there's no way that you can't just sit and not think about that. And then, matter of fact, you'll and I know a lot of people, yeah, a lot of people, maybe not, I would say a lot, because there's a lot of people that just don't talk about things. They don't talk about their thoughts, they don't talk about their feelings or experiences or what they experience. But there's a lot of people that know for sure you can go into any place, any setting, and you will behave accordingly, and you'll behave like you will listen to rules, you will follow rules, you will be an upstanding citizen, and you will, to a degree, act normal. But you know that at your base, you are part of the wild, and you know that how am I trying to say this? There's a lot of you that is just wild, you know, and most of that is just belongs to the animal kingdom. It has nothing. It has really nothing to do with this civilization, or um you know this type of reality or makeup of rules, or you know and some people don't really understand. It doesn't mean that you're like an uncontrollable beast and a fucking animal, and you're like disagreeable all the time, and you're hypersexual and hyper violent, and you're like hyper destructive. No, because see, those are negatives. It doesn't nothing necessarily means that. It's just like your dog belongs to wild. Your dog is an animal. Like, everyone is really an animal, but they really just don't know it. But your dog is not always in a state of violence, and your dog is not always in a state of horniness and hypersexuality. See, that's a misconception. But you think of it, your dog eats, shits, sleeps, okay, and plays and does whatever, but it's still a dog, though. Like, it's not an investment banker. Your dog is not going to put a fucking suit on, and you know what I'm saying? Your dog is not going to sit through a fucking meeting. It's still a dog. So that's what you got to understand when you. And I think I would dare say every person. I think every person has an animal side or a primal side, but they don't necessarily maybe acknowledge it or understand it, or maybe it just does not like express itself at all. Maybe it doesn't express itself at all, which I think I've seen people like that. It doesn't really, like, I would say they're so what you would call normal that I see no expression of that type of energy, let's just call it. I don't see that welling up in them or anything, you know, which is okay because everyone's different. But I would dare say that in some of us, that wild primal energy that comes from, um, wherever, and I wouldn't say it just has to come from somewhere external, because you got to understand this reality in itself has energies, and this world is still nature. This we live on Earth. We don't live on some manufactured mechanical fucking thing. Okay, so but this Earth in itself has an energy. This Earth has history to it. You gotta realize that. Before you were even born, and before people were really populating this Earth, there were things going on. So this Earth is old, and it's older than people think. So what you may or may not understand is that energy, that primal, that animal energy, will always be here. It is here, and you're connected to it, and it's in every living person, in every living being. And there are also, I would dare say, which I'm not going to get really too into, but there are, I'm not going to really call them gods of this earth or this domain, but let's just say they're forces, in their natural forces, because an intelligent force is still intertwined with nature, which everything is. Let's just say these forces are very, very primal. I'm going to say that again. These forces that govern a lot of this entire civilization, in a lot of, let's just even say, people's habits and behaviors, these forces are primal. Okay, these, I would dare say, these forces are also bestial. Okay, these are beast animal energies. Okay, which I would also say that harnessed in the right way would never really seem animal at all. Okay, what I'm saying is, if you harness these energies in a certain way, it may simply amount to things like um clarity of thought. Okay, like when I say clarity of thought, I mean the ability to think in a rational way where you could get the most optimal effect out of what you're trying to do with your thought, and be able to focus. Okay, also it could help with your confidence, like when you approach people, when you're doing something, to just do it, and you don't really think about it. You just do it, and you don't let anything impede that process. It can also help with strength and energy, in any regard. When you're doing anything physical, okay, it can also help with your how much is it? Your movement, your literal movement, like when you literally move your body to do something a certain way to get a result, you know, in terms of strength too. I mean, it's a huge amount of things. It also helps with magnetism, and I mean magnetism in the way of attraction, like simply attracting um people. Like oftentimes it would be a sexual attraction, like people will be drawn to you for some reason. It's almost like that saying animal magnetism, like you're literally, like you're like a magnet to that type of attention. But the thing is, I'm telling you, the I'll say it again, these energies are very, very, very primal. Okay, and these energies are ingrained in everything around us. Okay, but I would say If someone only knew, how am I trying to say this? If someone only knew the origins of some of these things, and yes, some of the, I'm gonna just say it, some of these origins of these things are extra terrestrial. I don't know if I really want to use that word because maybe it's not a proper word to use, but let's just say some of these energies are not really exactly earthly, or they come from a different dimension, but they're here, you know. And the thing is, they're very alive and they're very active, and they can be much more active in people, and they're much more active during certain time periods, certain periods of the year, certain times of the day, certain hours of the night, you know. So but I'm just saying all of this to say is that uh these energies are very, very, very much alive, and they are very, very old, and they are primal, and they're set in stone. I mean, they're so set in stone to the point to where you can't, there's nothing you can do about it. It's almost like it's like, think of it like this. Think of if you had a disease. I know it's a bad analogy to call anything disease, but think of it like you had a disease to where the only way that you could get rid of it would be to pretty much burn your entire body and all the blood cells in your veins, and everything would have to literally be burned away. Well, then if you did that, you'd be dead. Okay, so you can't. It's like you can't separate. It's like you can't separate something that is completely intertwined with something without destroying the entire thing. Okay, so it's kind of something like that. It's like saying if you were um that's like saying if you were a huge percentage of Italian descent, thinking that you could somehow take the Italian out of you. You just, it's not going to happen. It's in there. Okay, there's nothing you can do about it. You were born with it. It's in there. It's part of you. It governs you, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. Like you could suppress certain behaviors. You could try to maybe act a way that is acceptable, or try to uh find a way to balance yourself, but at your base, it's there, and it ain't fucking going nowhere. Okay, so back to what I was saying about, concentrating on something, or something just never will leave. It just never. You're like you every waking moment you're thinking about it. So it's funny because like sometimes I'll hear about the what people refer to as the underworld. And I'm not, it'd be too much to even go into. If you want to look up online what the underworld is, because many cultures have their idea of what the underworld is and what an underworld is. Um, you gotta understand, like, I would dare say many of us, we came from that domain, you know? Like, I would believe myself, I came from that domain. You know, what you would call the underworld, or what even some people would call a hell per se. You came from that. I came from that, most likely. You know, because think of it this way, and this is getting very spiritual and deep, because some people don't believe in the spirit world per se, or don't believe in anything spiritual. But what I'm saying is this, is that there is a spirit world, and before you were born into this reality, you came from somewhere. Your soul essence, your spirit came from somewhere. Okay? And there are places that house a multitude of spirits. And there's a hierarchy there. Okay? It's not just like we're all just spirits just hanging out here. No. You got to understand that in any domain, at least usually, there are things put in place to keep things in certain places. And there's levels of power. There's beings that are powerful enough to keep beings housed, or sometimes even imprisoned, in a place. Okay, there's guards that are placed there to keep things in a certain place, and there has to be a certain order. It's not just complete chaos and there's just like anything goes. It's never that way. Okay, because you got to think of it like this. Even in nature, it's like for instance, there's stronger animals, there's weaker animals, and you're not going to see you're not going to see a pack of baboons overrun some lions. You know what I'm saying? It's just not going to happen. So think of it like that. Or you're not going to see some little friggin' warthogs run out some damn rhinos. You know what I mean? Because it's just not like that. It's just things are built a certain way. And you also have to realize that things mirror each other. So in one, just like you have a military and you have police and you have people that are in power that keep things in a certain order here, you got to understand that there, you're going to have the same thing. As crazy as that sounds, some people think, what in the fuck are you talking about? Well, I don't know. Maybe someday you'll know. But I'm saying this to basically say that, what I'm really trying to say is that some things that people would call morbid or what's the word? Morbid or dark, or some people are, I don't know, I've met people I think that are just completely terrified of it. You have to understand that for some people, the same things that completely terrify you, someone like me is completely at home with it because I came from that and I am of that, But the misconception is that they think that because they don't understand something and all they've seen is Hollywood movies, that they think that what you would call a dark place or a hellish place or a place of, I guess, monsters, you'd call it, or whatever you'd want to call it, you need to understand that it's somewhere like that is just simply a place in itself. So it doesn't mean that someone or something is negative completely. Just like I said, any wild animal is not always completely negative. It just functions as it is. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta understand this. I'll give you an example. If you could imagine this. Imagine you run into one of these beings, right? And this thing is, pretty scary, pretty intimidating. Looks like it would rip you to shreds or whatever. Looks like it would, maul you or something. Now, really be real, okay? Think of it like this. Like, do lions that are full, and I mean their bellies are full, like they've eaten their stuff, to the fucking brim, okay? They just ate, man. They want to fucking sleep. Okay, now if a threat is enough of a threat and keeps preventing itself, maybe they'll go attack it. But for the most part, they just don't want to be bothered. You know what I mean? So you gotta understand. Like, a lot of times I hear people these cryptid stories, because they actually run into some of these beings, and you gotta understand, something is not just gonna jump on you and maul you and eat you, because that motherfucker's probably full. You know what I'm saying? He probably didn't ate a deer and this and that and was eating, he could have been eating leaves and herbs and he's fucking full. Maybe he has some indigestion, man. Maybe he has some diarrhea. I don't know. But he may just look at you as, or she or whatever, may just look at you like, look, man, my stomach hurts. I don't want shit to do with you right now. I'm not gonna even, like, just gonna look at you. You can walk by, just like, it may just look at you, you know, and has no desire to do anything with you. Maybe it's curious or surprised. But you have to really think of things like that. So think of it. Think what I'm saying that to say, when you think of the realm of like darkness, people always want to say darkness or things that you really don't understand or have a grasp on. Understand that just like a person, not everything wants to even interact with you on any level. Like, you're probably more annoying than anything. And it probably just wants to do what it's trying to do and be left alone. And it doesn't mean that it's just gonna like jump on you. It's like how people, are scared of cats and little dogs and animals sometimes. They think the thing is just gonna wanna bite them or come. It doesn't want shit to do with you, probably. You're fucking annoying. It's just like, you're just there, So think of it that way. I'm just saying that to think like, people a lot of times get so like terrified about things they don't understand, or things that they maybe didn't think even existed or comprehended. Think of it like that. And another thing I have to say is, when you come into contact with people, don't always jump to the conclusion that someone wants to interact with you in any way, man. Because if they do, most likely they'll approach you. But don't just assume when you see a person, like when you cross paths with a person, don't assume that that person wants anything to do with you, man. You know? Just don't always assume that. Basically, as much as I ranted about, I'm gonna go back to the point of saying that, like, so what I'm trying to say is, people, to me, people's thoughts or in behaviors and words, unless it's someone that I'm like trying to listen to, or wanting to approach, or whatever, or interested in what they're saying. Usually people in general are very invasive with everything. They're invasive with their energy, their words, their thoughts. They're just fucking very, very invasive, to my mind at least. And oftentimes I can't help but to think on uh the ideas about the other side, in beings, and the darkness and the light, and the other, the spiritual side of things. Because I mean, I look at it this way: one day I am gonna die. I'm not gonna live forever. One day I will be on the other side. That's everybody. You're gonna die someday, man. So one way or the other, you're gonna see something. You're gonna go over on the other side, man, because you're not living forever. But that's basically that's my rant, man.